Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Motor Safety Association's presentation on the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 2020, What You Need to Know. Welcome to the presentation webinar here. Hope you folks take a lot of some learning here from the presentation today. We are here to discuss the changes that were made to the regulations 1996. That was what it would say on probably your old copy of the regulations. Fast forward, here we are in 2020. That's 24 years since the last major amendment was made to the regulations. Holy smokes, it's been a while. A lot has changed, obviously, since then. And we're going to cover off some of the changes that were recently made. Before we get too far down the hole here, I just want to cover a couple of things out of the gate. If you have any technical issues today, please try and log out and log back in. You may have some issues with your browser, updates, firewalls, things like that. If you're not able to hear me or see this presentation, again, try logging out and logging back in. See if that corrects your problem. A second thing you could do is if there's somebody that's a little bit more IT or tech savvy, you could also have them maybe assist you in terms of helping you get up and running. But fear not, if you do have any issues during the presentation today, this presentation is being recorded, so we will have access to it at a later date. Once we post it up on the website, you will have access to the recording. So don't worry if you have any issues today, not a big problem. If you have questions today, please enter them into our question chat box. I won't be answering the questions as we go along today. I will be focusing on the content that's on my screen. However, what I will be doing is compiling all of the questions that are asked afterwards, and we will be answering them and sending them out to you by email. Some people are probably going to have some of the same questions. Some of you might ask maybe a little more of an enlightened question. We'll answer them all, and we'll make sure that everybody gets the answers to those questions at the conclusion of the presentation today. So covering off some of the changes that are going to be made. Some of them were more minor, some of them were a little bit more major. Depending on how often you use the regulations, it's going to impact you differently. I just want you guys to know there wasn't anything that's going to be earth-shattering for you in regards to the changes. There's probably going to be more changes coming in future years. We'll kind of wait for that. But the changes that we made today, we want to cover them off, make sure that you're prepared for them, make sure that you understand what has changed between the 96 version and the 2020 version. And we're going to cover off all those things for you here today. So right out of the gate, the government of Saskatchewan, they have decided to amend the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 1996. Like I said, 24 years is a long time for a major amendment, but here we are. And now we have, as of April 1st, 2021, the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 2020. So they did come into effect this year as of April 1st, and organizations are expected to be compliant with them. So we are going to cover off some of the changes. Like I said, a lot of them are a little bit smaller in nature, but we will make sure that we hit on all of them for you folks. A copy of the new regulations is available for download at http www.motorsafety.ca/links. You can also go to the Government of Saskatchewan website. They will also have the new regulations available for download there. You can also purchase a paper copy or order a paper copy from Saskatchewan's Queen's Printer and Publications by calling 306-787-6894. And they will be able to deliver or send you a new copy of the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 2020. So let's get right into it. A review was done back in 2019, actually, of the Health and Safety Regulations 1996. The intent of that review, it was really completed to conduct what's called harmonization. And in a nutshell, harmonization was an initiative is an initiative of the Canadian Free Trade Agreement with the goal of breaking down barriers between provinces and territories to allow for more free trading within Canada. So as part of those harmonization efforts, we saw them harmonize certain personal protective equipment requirements with other jurisdictions in Canada. They've also updated some of the references and made some minor housekeeping amendments. And this is to assist owners, employers, contractors, workers, everybody who uses the health and safety regulations in understanding their rights and obligations. So a little side note for you as well, if you're familiar with the old book or you had the physical copy laying around somewhere, you'll notice that big thick book, the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 1996, had the Act as well as the regulations consolidated into one big book. There was a lot of issues with, I know as we carried them around in classrooms or as we used them in our offices, the pages start to peel out of the spine of the book because the spine is a lot smaller and can't really accommodate, I guess, that size of a book. So what they've now done is they've separated them into two separate books. We've got the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and we've got the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 2020. Two separate books, half the size. Hopefully that'll fix some of the spine issues that we were having with pages falling out. But nonetheless, they are two separate books now. So when you order them, you will also order them separately. So speaking to the summary of what we're going to be discussing today, we're going to kind of go over this, the various different changes. And here's a quick summary of the various changes. We've got different housekeeping amendments that were made. We've seen them consolidate and renumber the regulations. That's probably one of the larger pieces that we're going to cover off today. They've also introduced a new regulation for special vaccination leave, which we'll talk about. And obviously, as we discussed prior, harmonization of personal protective standards as well as harmonization of CSA standard for first aid kits, which is going to be a little bit more impactful for you folks on the call today, as that will apply directly to all businesses across Saskatchewan. So general housekeeping amendments. So they made some general amendments to the regulations in order to update some of the references to things like repealed legislation, some of the changes in the language, some of the changes in definitions, and things like that. And again, they've modernized the language to reflect kind of the current practice of using gender neutral language. And what we have available is the table of concordance. And this table is also available at our website at the link I provided there on the prior page. It's also available at the Government of Saskatchewan. And what the table of concordance is it gives an overview of the changes that were made from the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 96 to the new regulations in 2020. There's new definitions, items that have been repealed. It shows where minor and major changes have been made. And I just kind of brought a screenshot of this up for you folks to have a look at. And as you can see on the left-hand side, we've got the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 96 on the left-hand column there. And on the right-hand column, we've got the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 2020. So as you go down the left-hand side, what they've actually done, it's quite a large document. They've covered off every single regulation in the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations. And if any changes were made, they've referenced those changes throughout. And as you can see on the left, this is what it was in 96. 2020, this is now what it is. So we saw some of those changes made. As you go down the left-hand column, you can see that they have the controlled product definition, and that was actually repealed in the regulations 2020. Same thing with the emergency medical technician definition. It was repealed in the 2020 version, so you won't find it there. Also, if you go down to the very bottom there, you see where it says new. We've got hazardous product on the right-hand side. So that's saying that in this section, we've got now a new definition, hazardous product, and it has the definition laid out there for you. So this is just one page of the table of concordance. It's several pages long. It goes through every regulation. And like I said, it allows you to look on the left-hand side there of what the 96 version was and what the changes are that have been made, minor or major, to the regulations here in 2020. So if you're looking kind of for a general overview of what's changed, that would be a good thing to browse is the table of concordance. So discussing the renumbering of the regulations, and this was one of the more significant changes that was made, especially if you reference any of the prior regulations in any of your policies, procedures, any sort of training, education information. For example, ourselves, we had to go through all of our training and education material and make sure that we removed the old regulation numbers and then inserted the new regulation numbers into them. And we're going to go over that in just a moment and what changed there. But the renumbering was definitely significant, as a lot of the associations, the other safety associations, government agencies that provide these education and training, they all had to go and do this. So it was quite a large undertaking, but certainly one that was worthwhile in the sense that this is going to provide improved ease of use for anybody who uses the health and safety regulations as well as the Act. Because now that they are renumbered, the health and safety regulations actually align more appropriately with the Saskatchewan Employment Act. And they're flexible enough to accommodate future amendments that might come down the road. So it gives them a little bit more of a long-term advantage and a more consistent reference system when you're using the health and safety regulations. So this might be of a great use to committee members who often use the regulations or should be using the regulations. And I'm just going to kind of briefly glean over what changed and what that looks like. So if you have your physical copy of the book or whether you have the PDF version pulled up here on your computer, you can see that if you open that book or you go to the very first page of the Saskatchewan Employment Act, you'll get that first page on the left-hand side that says the Saskatchewan Employment Act. You flip to the next page, and on the right-hand side, you would see the table of contents. In the table of contents in the Act, they've got various different parts. So we got Part 1, Preliminary Matters, Part 2, Employment Standards, and within those parts, there's different divisions and subdivisions, as well as sections. So Part 1 in Preliminary Matters, we would have Section 1-1, short title, Section 1-2, Interpretation. If we went to Part 2, Employment Standards, under Division 1, Preliminary Matters for the part, again, we would see Section 2-1, Interpretation of the part. Section 2-2, Meaning of Permit to Work. So this is what the general structure of the Saskatchewan Employment Act looked like. Now, when we would go to the regulations, this is the 96 version, we would see a bit of a disconnect there. So again, you open your book, you see the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations, 1996. That would have been that's on the left-hand side here. And then you flip that page over and you get your table of contents. But as you folks can see, and I'll just flip back and forth really quick, you can see we've got different parts. And then the section numbers, otherwise known as the regulation numbers, were listed 1 through, I believe, 494. So we've got a little bit of a disconnect in terms of how things are referenced. So we go back to the Act, they're referencing the parts, but they're broken into sections like Section 1-1, 1-2. You go to the table of contents for the regulations, and we've got the part, but we've got Regulation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now, with the regulations of 2020, you can see now that they've made that a little bit more consistent. They've corrected that alignment issue. We've now got the parts, and under each part, we've got the sections, which is the regulation number. So Section 1-1 or Regulation 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, and so on and so forth. So they made it a little bit better in terms of the alignment. They've also done away with the Roman numerals. So Part 1, 2, and 3, we would have seen in the old version, those listed as Roman numerals. I don't even know if they use or teach Roman numerals in school anymore, but we've done away with that. We've now got the actual numbering system. So that is fantastic. Whoops, I zoom ahead. There we go. So consolidation of the regulations. This was another major piece that was done. Again, meant to bring things into alignment, allow for an increased ease of use for users. The Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 2020 has consolidated the regulations of 96, the Occupational Health and Safety Prime Contractor Regulations, as well as the Occupational Health and Safety WHMIS, or Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System Regulations. Prior to this, what we would have seen if you, again, had your Regulations 96 book in front of you, you would have seen these books all separated by a blue page. And in the very back of the book, you would have found your WHMIS regulations and your prime contractor regulations. Those were divided by those blue pages. They had their own separate section with their own separate table of contents. And ultimately, again, this was completed in order to kind of reduce some of that confusion and increase that ease of use, because before it was quite cumbersome to go through the old regulations. And I know even when we would teach them in courses, people kind of would have that issue with that disconnect between, again, the act, the regulations. Why are these regulations separated in the back? Why aren't they just in the 2020 or the 96 version? So I'm going to kind of give you a quick overview of what that looked like again. So the before picture of the 96 version, we would have flipped to the back. We would have pulled back one of those blue pages, and we would have seen the Occupational Health and Safety WHMIS regulations. Flip to the next page, it would have had its separate table of contents with, again, regulation numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. With the 2020 version now, we see that they have now removed that piece at the back of the book, and they've given the WHMIS regulations their own part. So now we have part 22 in the table of contents of the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 2020. Part 22 is now the Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System Regulations. So they did away with that separate section of the book, and they just gave it its own part within the regulations in that same table of contents that you would reference all of the other regulations, which only makes sense, right? So again, just a quick one for the prime contractor regulations. Again, they had a separate page, or that blue page would have divided the prime contractor regulations in the back. In the old version, had its own separate table of contents. In the new one, it's been given, again, its own part within the table of contents of the Health and Safety Regulations 2020. So you will now find the prime contractor regulations that were in the back of the 96 version. It's now part 33 in the table of contents of the new version, the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 2020. So I hope that really increases and allows for ease of use. I know for myself, it has been a lot easier. I know some people are kind of with the changes. It seems maybe insignificant or material, but if you use this book quite often, it'll make things a lot easier, whether you're a health committee, whether you're an employer trying to find some information out, or whether you're, like myself, a safety advisor working at a safety association. This will be a welcomed change going forward. So, as we had discussed in the summary of changes, we have also now seen the addition of a special vaccination leave, which is a regulation that was added to the new 2020 version. And this was added in the efforts to obviously increase immunization of COVID-19 across Saskatchewan. So now they've created this regulation, Section 6-22.1 of the regulations, which is under Part 6 of the General Health Requirements. This special vaccination leave regulation states that workers are now entitled to a minimum of 3 consecutive hours of paid leave during working hours to obtain a COVID-19 vaccination, or more than 3 hours paid leave during working hours if their employer determines the circumstances warrant a longer period. So for a lot of you folks, I know this will be a very helpful regulation in the sense that I know when we were just starting to kind of go through the vaccination, or they were starting to get vaccinations out, you could book into a clinic, but to book into a clinic, it may have taken you weeks to get a vaccination. So they opened up drive-through sites, but if you went to a drive-through site, it may take you hours to get through a drive-through site. I know as we're kind of further along now, the lines are somewhat dwindling at some of those drive-through sites. I just went through one recently myself to get my vaccination. But prior to that, and probably as they ramp up and do the second doses, we're going to see those drive-through sites again increase in volume. And I know my sister, she sent me when she went to go get her and her family immunized or vaccinated, I should say. They were in line, I think, at 8:30, and as far as you could see, and by 12:30, she sent me another Snapchat. They were still in line, and they sent me another one at I think 3:30 or 4 o'clock, and they were at the 1 hour waiting sign section. So I thought, holy man, they just waited almost an entire day or a full shift in order to get their vaccination. So this is very much welcomed regulation. It allows people to go and take some time off work to make sure that they can get their vaccination. As you guys know, our target was 70% in order to start removing restrictions, which I believe we're going to see coming up on July 11th. So efforts like this regulation really supported those efforts in allowing people to go get their vaccination, and hopefully we can get back to the way things were and back to normal sooner than later. I know a lot of people are looking forward to summer, taking a little bit of time off and the beaches and getting out and about. So we're all looking very much forward to that. So the harmonization of standards, you heard me kind of talk about this at the outset of some of the changes that were made. Excuse me. Again, this review was completed to really conduct harmonization, right? And that was part of the Canadian Free Trade Agreement initiative with the goal of breaking down barriers between provinces and territories to allow for more free trading within Canada. But most importantly, it also ensures that we've got consistent equipment and practices that are being used across jurisdictions, which is going to enhance health and safety, not only here in Saskatchewan, but in other provinces abroad. Obviously, if you go from Manitoba to Saskatchewan to Alberta, we've got different regulations that we follow. So that is something that's distinguishable between the three provinces. But when we harmonize certain standards, like things for PPE, certain equipment, certain practices, and it's the same across the board, it certainly improves kind of the labor mobility aspect of things and reducing costs and administration for workers and business. As many of you folks on this webinar might know or might be a part of, you have multiple organizations operating across different provinces. Some of you might be all the way across Canada. And so when you do that, obviously, if we've got certain regulations here in Saskatchewan that are prohibited or not acknowledged in other provinces, you're going to have to possibly buy new equipment or adhere to different practices and standards in those provinces. And it's up to you to obviously understand what those regulations are prior to going in and working in those provinces. But when we harmonize certain things like the PPE standards and requirements, we're going to get, like I said, less of that, more labor mobility, reduce those costs associated with having to buy different equipment in order to meet standards in different provinces. So this will help a lot in that effort. And again, you'll hear us use the word approved standards. If you read the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations, they will reference or use that language, approved standards, quite often. Approved standards, the one that's probably most referenced here in Canada or that we're most familiar with in Saskatchewan would be CSA, so the Canadian Standards Association. You'll also have heard of ANSI, the American National Standards Institute. We've got the Canadian Center for Occupational Health and Safety. The equivalent in the US would be Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So these are different organizations that are accredited to approved standards. CSA is accredited by the Standards Council of Canada, which is a crown corporation that promotes voluntary standardization in Canada. And that accreditation verifies that CSA is competent to carry out standards development and certification functions, and is based on internationally recognized criteria and procedures. So something that is, I think it's in the works right now. I don't believe it's done, but the Ministry of Labor Relations and Workplace Safety will actually be providing a list on the Government of Saskatchewan website of what they deem to be approved standards. So you'll likely see, if not a couple, if not all of these organizations here that I have listed on the bottom of this page, will likely be included in those standards, but it will give people a better idea of what exactly that approved standard means. And as we go to the next slide, we'll kind of discuss what that meaning is and how it's defined in legislation. So again, various provisions of the regulations refer to approved standards, practices, or equipment. So for example, in section 7-8 of the regulations, we've got, it says in there, if an industrial eye or face protector is required by these regulations to be provided or used, the industrial eye or face protector must be approved. But it just says that, must be approved. So people are wondering, well, approved by who? What does approved mean? Well, approved means approved by an agency acceptable to the director, and that's the director of the Ministry of Labor Relations and Workplace Safety, for use in accordance with any terms and conditions determined by the agency, or approved by a certificate of the director subject to any terms and conditions the director considers appropriate. So again, it's going to help when they release that list, so that when you come across that word in the legislation that says approved, they will have a list of those organizations that approve standards or that they deem are acceptable as approved standards. The most common one, again, that you'll see is CSA, and we're going to discuss CSA here on this slide. So CSA was actually federally chartered to create standards in 1919, so they are over 100 years old. So that's, again, why they're most reputable and widely known here in Canada. They've been around for a very long time. They publish standards in print and electronic form, and they provide different training and advisory services as well. And they're actually composed of representatives from industry, government, and different consumer groups. So you'll often see that green symbol there. A lot of people on their steel-toe boots or other equipment, you'll see that green CSA logo, and that will let you know that that equipment is approved by CSA. That registered mark can be found on all kinds of products, equipment, and labels, and is the identifying mark for a piece of equipment being CSA approved. Excuse me. Harmonization of PPE standards. So we just kind of discussed this briefly, but the following personal protective standards have now been adopted as approved standards here in our regulations in Saskatchewan. We've got the industrial protective headwear, which is now our approved standard CSA Z94.1 2015, eye and face protectors, protective footwear, hearing protective devices. You can see the different CSA standards that are referenced next to each. The government of Saskatchewan has adopted many standards, and this term, again, is referenced many times throughout these regulations. So when you see them say approved standards for industrial protective headwear, face protectors, footwear, hearing protection devices, these are the standards that they are referencing. They may not reference them exclusively in the regulations, but these are the supporting standards for those regulations. Personal flotation devices on the bottom, they must be labeled as approved by Transport Canada or other recognized maritime authority. Probably has no effect on any of you folks in our rate code, but there was no regulatory amendment that was required to adopt these standards because, as we said before, they use the word or operate under the guise of the word approved standard in the book. Hopefully they will release that list to us soon so that we can see all of the various different organizations and approved standards in the future. But these are the ones that were adopted and approved for our health and safety legislation here in Saskatchewan. So this is probably the more significant and larger change that was made that will affect everybody across Saskatchewan, and probably the one that most people are interested in and unaware of, as well, as we've found out going along our travels during inspections and things like that. So they've harmonized the standard for first aid kits. And as part of a Canada-wide initiative, again, to remove those barriers, trade, investment, labor mobility, Saskatchewan employers and contractors are not required to maintain first aid kits based on the Canadian Standards Association Standard Z 1220-17. Okay, the new regulation requires an employer now to complete a workplace first aid kit, first aid kit risk assessment. So the new or the assessment, will determine the risk classification of the work site, which is then used to determine the first aid kits and first aid personnel that are required on the work site. So depending on where you work, that is going to be influenced, or the risk assessment will be influenced by that. And I'm actually going to take you onto our website, show you where you can find those resources to conduct a first aid risk assessment yourselves. Now, the first aid risk assessment needs to be completed by a competent person and reviewed annually, as well when business circumstances change. The assessment should be completed in consultation with the employer or health committee and representative. Okay, so going on here to the next page, Annex A of the CSA standard, it says provides direction for undertaking a workplace first aid risk assessment. What we did here at MSA is we took that Annex A and the CSA standard, groomed through it, and created our own first aid risk assessment template, which you folks can use. I will ensure that this is emailed out to you at the conclusion of the webinar today. I'm also going to go onto our website and show you folks how to access it for those folks who aren't live here today, but may be watching this webinar in the future. We've also done a webinar on the first aid kit risk assessment. So it trains you on how to use the risk assessment tool. It's about an hour long. That webinar is on our website. I'll show you where to find that as well. And that way you folks can access that training and also ensure that you are doing the first aid risk assessment up into the Annex A or the standard, the CSA standard that has now been approved. So give me one moment here. And I'm going to open that up for you folks. So we are going to go to open up a web browser. We're going to go on Google Chrome here, and you're just going to type in Motor Safety Association. Okay, so after you type in Motor Safety Association, I want you to go up here and click on Motor Safety Association. This will take you to our website. And when you get to our website, just one second here, my computer is kind of glitching on me. There we go. When you get to our website, if you go to the far right here under Contact, you folks can go down to Links. And this is just so for I guess for you folks who want to go to the website and download the Saskatchewan Employment Act or the Health and Safety Regulations 2020, you go to Contact, go to Links, and you can actually find, we've got various different links here. You can actually find the link to the Saskatchewan Employment Act as well as Health and Safety Regulations. The table of concordances in here in the comparison table as well, and the 2020 overview. Now, to get to the first aid risk assessment, you folks are going to go to Training and Forms. You're going to click on Forms. We're just scroll down, and we've got here right at the top, MSA First Aid Kit Risk Assessment CSA Standard. You're going to click on that link, and we're going to open it up. And there it is. This is just an overview of the first aid kit risk assessment and the CSA standard. And then as you scroll down, you will find the template that we've provided you to conduct your risk assessment at your business. I'm not going to go through this. I'll just scroll through briefly to give you an overview of what it looks like. You folks will be responsible for filling out one of these risk assessments or conducting this first aid risk assessment at your business and ensuring that it's completed, and that if you have any additional supplies or training requirements that need to be met, that you go and procure those items. So again, this is the template for it. We've got a few different parts, information for you to fill out to conclude that risk assessment. Like I said before, we've got a webinar that will walk you through each and every page, each and every section of this risk assessment tool. And we've also provided here on the website, so as you scroll down a little bit further, we've got an example completed of a first aid risk assessment done. Again, it's a made-up business, a made-up first aid risk assessment, but it shows you the process and how you can complete it. So for some of you, this may be enough to complete the first aid risk assessment. For those of you who are still unsure, again, go and access our webinar. I will show you how to access that here in a moment, or give us a shout, reach out to one of our advisors. We'd be more than happy to assist you on site, by phone, whatever is most comfortable for you in conducting this first aid risk assessment and helping you to be compliant here with the new standard. So if you're looking for a little bit more in terms of the training, you're a little bit unsure after going through the risk assessment template, you're going to go up here to training and forms again. You'll go to online training. We're going to scroll down. Oh, sorry, I went to the wrong one. You're going to go to services, sorry. And you're going to, so at the top, go to services, scroll down to webinars. This webinar will also be found on this page later on once we conclude the course and add it to our list. And you'll find a whole bunch of webinars on there. Look for the one you're looking or that you're trying to find, which is this one, the First Aid Kit Risk Assessment Training. You will click on this and it will take you to a YouTube page which will have the recording of our first aid risk assessment training that was done. And like I said, if you're looking to re-watch this webinar, you had technical difficulties, want to have a look at this webinar again, you will be able to find this webinar on this page as well, and so much more. Please go to our website, www.motorsafety.ca. We've got a lot of great information for you folks on here, whether it's registering for some online training, going and obtaining some safe work practices or procedures, or just like I said, wanting to view a webinar on our page. Go to our website. We've got a lot of great information that will support you folks in your health and safety efforts. So I'm just going to exit out of that here and get back to my PowerPoint. Oops. And there we are. So again, if you folks have any questions, definitely reach out to us. We're more than happy to help you out with those. In terms of the CSA standards, a lot of people, you've seen me reference those CSA standards. If you go to CSA, they offer them at a cost or a price if you want to purchase the standards. However, they can be accessed for free. Any of the harmonized standards, those can be accessed for free by using this process here. I'm going to ensure that I send an attachment in the email to you folks, as well as reference it on our YouTube page on how to access the CSA standards. You can see the process here. You'll go to the web store at CSA. You'll create yourself a free account. Once you've created an account, you'll log in. You'll use the search bar to search for the standard that you're trying to find or interested in. You'll click the hyperlink in the standard title, select the View Access button near the top left, and the CSA standard is now available to view on your web browser. So I'm going to send you an attachment that'll allow you to go through that process and do that. So we actually are near the end of our webinar. Like I told you guys, some major changes, some minor changes, nothing that's too earth-shattering. We're probably going to see some more changes coming down the road. Obviously, like I said, the last one was done 24 years ago. That's quite a substantial time between 1996 and 2020. A lot has happened since then. We're going to likely see some more updates to not only safety regulations, but some of the jargon and lingo that's used throughout the legislation, as things have obviously been more digitized. We're more online now. We're probably going to see some of those changes down the road, I would assume, as we go forward. But as we have it now, these are the new regulations that we are working with. Like I said, I'm going to send out some email attachments. Those attachments are going to include a copy of the Health and Safety Act, as well as the new Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 2020. I'm going to include the first aid risk assessment that we just went over on the website, as well as the CSA standard, so that you folks can view and access some of these standards online as well. Keep in mind that we are also going to be compiling all of the questions that you folks entered into the chat box. We'll address them and we're going to send them out to you in the future. So be on the lookout for that. There is also a quiz for certificates. So if you folks have need a completion or kind of a certificate of completion for this course, or you would like one, there's a small 5-question quiz, fairly easy to take. That'll be included in the email. Please click into that for that test and that certificate. You can print it off afterwards. And just a reminder, you can get your own copy of the regulations at Saskatchewan's Queen's Printer. They can send you a physical copy by mail. Just give them a call at 306-787-6894 and they'll take care of you. I believe they're $20 a book, so $40 in total for the 2 books. So thank you so much. I know that was a fairly quick webinar, but it was intended to be. If you have any questions about the regulations, guys, about anything from this course today or health and safety related, please give us a shout, 306-721-0688. Our administrators will hook you up with one of our safety advisors and ensure that you're taken care of. You can also email info@motorsafety.ca if you have any questions from today, or like I said, would like to engage us with any of the services that we offer you folks. Go to our website, www.motorsafety.ca. A lot of great information on there. We continue to add onto our website, add materials, resources, education, and training for you folks. So please take advantage of it. It is free for you to use for our members. So please take advantage of that. Thanks so much again for taking the time to be with us here today, guys. Signing off. Hope you have a wonderful day, a great weekend, and hopefully here as things open up, you folks have an enjoyable summer. So stay safe. We'll see you guys down the road. Take care for now.